Marina could not have thought that one day she would become a separator, the woman who destroys someone else's family, and who for this came boomerang from fate. But that's how it turned out. That's what she repeated to herself every time when her soul began to scratch, not cats scratching, but whole saber-toothed tigers. Boris was a man completely different in nature. He and Marina met banal and yet memorable way. He came to the firm where she worked as an accountant in order to arrange a scandal. Boris was an entrepreneur, and the firm where Marina worked sold all sorts of packaging materials, and something there Boris received improper quality, and for some reason decided that the big showdown should start with the accounting department. Okay, man, interrupted his angry tirade Tatiana, senior accountant, and at the same time the senior woman in the team. We are not responsible for what you ask. Why are you hooliganizing here? Go to the chief and organize concerts at his place and stop bullying us. Boris somehow shrank at once, even seemed shorter in stature. He apologized and left, but the next day he came back with several boxes of candy for the accounting department. All these gifts to back up his apology. And then somehow it so happened that they got to talking with Marina, word for word. A couple of days later, Boris met her after work, but not at the office, but a little farther away, around the corner. Did something happen to you again? Marina asked. No, I just needed to see you, replied the man. Why? Marina nervously adjusted the strap of her purse on her shoulder. You are married, she blurted out, because the ring glittered on the finger of the man, and for some reason Marina felt that it was very important to say it. I need someone to talk to. Boris waved his hands. I realize that it probably sounds like the ravings of a madman, but I really need someone to talk to. And you seem to me a person responsive and human. Marina wanted to then simultaneously laugh and run away somewhere from such a strange invitation for a cup of coffee. But she agreed, because she thought that she does not seem to be doing anything that is very reprehensible. She just needed to talk to someone, and she wasn't really in a hurry to get home, so she wasn't doing anything wrong, was she? So they went to the cafe. They ordered coffee and cakes. Boris insisted that he was buying, and joked that he didn't have to pay the therapist. And Boris turned out to be a surprisingly pleasant conversationalist. Yes, the content of his speech was not pleasant, but how he spoke. From the story of Boris, Marina learned that he is 36 years old, that he has been married for more than 12 years to a woman whom he married for a big, youthful, but turned out to be so deceptive, illusory love. There was a child in this marriage, but he was not Boris's own. Catherine had already been married before him, and had a daughter. Boris said that in recent years he lives like on a powder keg. Every day there may be a scandal, and literally in the same place. That's why my business is going well, he grinned wryly. At work sometimes I sleep at night, just to avoid going home. I think about business all the time. That's what saves me, or thoughts of family life will crush. Marina did not assume that this meeting will not be the only one. But a few days later Boris met her again, and they went to the same place, and again talked only now not only about him, but also about Marina's life in general. She did not really want to tell about herself, but he insisted, and she gave in. Marina said that she is 28 years old, that she lives with her parents, and on his apartment is still only saving. Wants to get a promotion at work, and then already take out a mortgage. She admitted that the novels in her life, of course, were, but here is no luck with men. And not because she has some excessive demands to them, as if the prince is inadequate, but just, there is no with them that spark of mutual understanding, which attracts two people to each other. It seems to me, said Boris, looking into her eyes, that with you it is possible not a spark, but a whole fire. His simple and apt compliment somehow very touched Marina. They talked some more so, about small things, about everything in the world, and after that again met. Now Marina and Boris together sometimes walked around the city. He turned out to be an intelligent, interesting conversationalist. Art gallery, the embankment evening. Marina more and more in her imagination did not understand and reproached this very Catherine, because it was completely incomprehensible. How can you not appreciate, not love such a man? And then, when she suddenly realized that she had already herself fell in love with Boris, it was too late to change anything. It was a strong, clinging feeling, and it seemed as natural as breathing, for example. Are things worse for you? Marina once asked, because Boris was gloomier than usual. Home again? No, to this I am already used to it. He waved his hand. Sorry. Now I'll gather my senses and let's go for a walk. You don't need to be burdened with my troubles. And yet, then, with hiccups and demonstrating clearly that this is overstepping himself, Boris confessed to Marina that he in business flew a large fine and here twists and turns in an attempt to somewhere urgently borrow money to pay for it, and do not want to turn to credit organizations, because their interest is atrocious, those who can quickly give, and acquaintances and friends all as one evaporated as heard about the money. "I'll help," said decisively Marina. "What? No, I cannot. It's wrong." Boris refused, Marina insisted, and then he finally agreed, and 1,000 times must have said what she is amazingly kind, generous, responsive. What a kind soul she has. Marina immediately went to the bank and withdrew the necessary amount from her account. "Let me now write a receipt so that you do not think that I cheated," Boris said loudly. "Right in the bank branch." "Quiet you," Marina even took offense. "I do not think anything like that. Do not, well, really, do not need any receipt. You will pay back when you can, I believe you." It was then, returning home that day on the trolley bus, Marina and told Elena, a friend with whom she often went home, about Boris. "All I can tell you is to stay away from him," said Elena, and it sounded so sharp, against the background of how they had previously communicated, that Marina just opened her mouth. "This is not a man or a person you can trust. Yes, he is unusual, but I can see in your eyes that everything is bad." Elena jokingly wagged her finger. "Just stay away from him, and better yet, with him never meet again." But Marina could not follow this advice. First, because she had already lent money, and accordingly, at least once, and then had to see each other to take them back. Secondly, because Boris in principle did not seem to her some kind of villain from which you need to stay away. Marina even thought that maybe Helena was saying that because she herself had a quiet personal life and was lonely. So maybe she's just jealous. In the following days, when Marina rode on the same transport, she and Elena talked, but already less, more coolly, and on completely different topics without Boris. And then, about 3 weeks later, Boris returned the debt. He thanked Marina and almost not a full report to her to give her about how and what he did in his business to get out of the crisis and improve all matters. And returning the money, he also handed Marina a bouquet, a gorgeous bouquet of roses. "Thank you, but this is unnecessary," she replied, and in her heart treacherously something trembled. Boris replied that it is not superfluous, and in general, this is the least he can thank her, as she was the only person in his environment who not only helped, but in principle he understands, which can be trusted. So he said a lot more. And if Marina had the opportunity to observe themselves from the outside, she might have squealed. "We are not turning the wrong way. Stop. We can't." But she just existed in the present moment, and in it more and more fell under the influence of Boris. And when he made it clear that he wanted to move their relationship to a completely different level, Marina agreed. And so, she became the mistress of a married man. It turned out that Boris had rented an apartment for their meetings, and after a while, he even put forward a proposal. Why not Marina there at all from her parents? It would be much more convenient, it would be cozier, and created a truly homely atmosphere. And it so happened that the apartment, which rented Boris, allowed to greatly reduce the trip to work. And Marina thought that in principle, and this is nothing wrong, well, quite critically bad. After all, Boris assured that with his wife they have long lived only as neighbors, and not the best. They talked a lot again. To be exact, Boris talked mostly, and Marina listened. She, in his opinion, was a great listener. He even took offense sometimes when she, in his opinion, began to talk too much about herself. After all, she, as Boris assured her, life was easy, simple, and successful. But how difficult everything was. And in marriage and at work, Marina, however, sometimes felt guilty. After all, she herself once fervently condemned women who take away other people's husbands. But, on the other hand, she said to herself, here, after all, how else to look? She had not deliberately done anything to destroy Boris's marriage, and the child was not his. She was there at a difficult moment. And so it all came together that they found that they are perfect for each other. In fact, Marina now and then conducted a dialogue with herself, and more often than not one, recognizing that she is no nasty separation. Something happened again, Marina asked, when Boris one day after dinner became very sad. "Everything is fine. Do not fill your head," he smiled sadly. "It's impossible." Marina smiled. "Come on, tell me." And he told me that business problems had started again. Much worse than last time. And the only way to solve them was with money. But we need a lot of money. When Boris named the amount, Marina only aghast. It really was a lot. "Well, forget it," sighed Boris. "I'll think of something." "Listen," he suddenly revived. "And you said that you're saving for a mortgage, right?" Almost saved up. Marina nodded. My parents still help me, and grandfather. But I do not know, you see, at work finally promoted, and the options for apartments I already look at. I think in the next 6 months should definitely take. I knew it, Boris grinned. No, I don't blame you. After all, who am I to you? What are we? Friends? Lovers? I don't know. Boris waved his hand and started to pack. He said that he needed to go outside to get some air and think about everything. Marina shrugged her shoulders and began to wash the dishes. Yes, she understood that he had problems, but she was not ready to solve them like this. And at the same time, she felt so guilty about it. Boris soon called and said that he would not come back. He went to spend the night in his wife's apartment. Marina felt even more guilty. Well, it was necessary to refuse so rudely. It was not surprising that he was offended. The next day they did not see each other. And the next day too, Boris said he was very busy. There were big problems in the business, so I should have understood him. I found someone to borrow money from, Boris said, and explained that he would take them from a private person against a receipt of personal responsibility. Marina listened and was shocked. She understood that Boris was going to borrow money from some bandit, and she realized that will be just a traitor, an empty, not a relative, a close person, if she does not help Boris. After all, did she need the mortgage so urgently? Boris had already borrowed from her once and paid her back. At work again, promoted, so it is necessary not to be cowardly and act. And literally the next day Marina gave Boris all the amount he needed. Receipt. This time he did not offer her a receipt, but he thanked her very much and swore that he would return everything. And time flew and something was not as Marina expected. First, Boris suddenly said that in order to correct things, he needs not a month, but 2, then another month and another. Then he said that his daughter was found some serious disease, and therefore he has to spend more time with her and his wife. Marina was upset, but agreed. After all, it had to be a completely inhuman monster to abandon his family at such a time, and her Boris was not like that. And his coldness, his irritability, all his changes. She wrote off to what a big load he now has in business and personal life. You just have to wait, said to herself sometimes Marina. Looking in the mirror, she read somewhere that these are positive conversations with their own reflection contribute to a better life, and everything will be fine. And then, well, somehow, suddenly everything became quite bad. Boris just got all cold and said that this apartment will no longer pay for rent, so Marina better go back to her parents. They don't see each other very often anyway. So, well, what kind of joint apartment? They're not a family, that's ridiculous. And then when one day Marina started talking about money, Boris said that actually that he does not know when he can give. And she, apparently completely on the material obsession, if she constantly asks about it. Boris reproached her that even his wife doesn't nag him that much. I think we better part, he said at the end of this conversation. And without giving any explanation, without even listening, and what Marina will say, he just left the cafe, leaving her alone at the table, and disconnected the phone. It was probably in some way a happy coincidence that after the breakup fell out in the schedule of the working at Marina just the weekend, and she spent them in tears and then got ready to go home and return to her parents. They, by the way, had about her novel the most vague ideas, and when the daughter returned, did not begin to pry into the soul. Marina blamed herself for everything: naivety, blind trust, and that still offended not only for a broken heart, but the money was a pity. Yes, now she could admit to herself, Boris deceived her cleverly, and the amount was not small. And it was unclear now what to say to their own relatives when they will ask about, well, how is it with the apartment? In the end, everything Marina shared with only one person, with Elena. She listened attentively, did not agala nor censured, but only clarified a couple of points, unlikely to make you feel better from the fact that you are not the first such in the world. No relief at all. Marina agreed. She had been writing on the transport for quite a long time, and all for the sake of it, a heart-to-heart talk. But there is a way out. What? Go straight to his house. Do you know the address? Here, go there. No. You listen to me first. Elena smiled sadly. Maybe it's shameful, uncomfortable, but it was your money. And your family's. Go to him and tell his wife everything as it is. Maybe if she's an honest person, she'll put pressure on her husband to repay the debt. But it's not a fact, but be prepared for the fact that, in general, if you were just an acquaintance, which is so involved, it's one thing. But you are, it turns out, in general, you understand. Marina understood everything perfectly well, and it was so incredibly hard to decide to go. But she did it, and the next weekend went to the known address. The door opened, a woman opened and squinted as if she saw through Marina and knew exactly what she is so bad separation. "You to Boris?" Catherine asked. Marina nodded instead of answering. "There is no," it pressed her lips as spit out the woman. "On the run, the bastard. Looking for him already. You gave him how much money?" "Ah, excuse me, how do you know?" Marina whispered. "So, you're not the first," said Boris's wife. "Come in, or at least explain what's going on." It turned out that their marriage really long ago cracked at the seams, and Catherine turned a blind eye to the fact that Boris Walks lived in fact as bad neighbors, and slowly she was preparing for a competent divorce. But for a long time Catherine did not know that Boris, it turns out, not just mistress's maid, but also cunningly lured them out of money. The scheme was one: took a little loan, returned and took a solid amount of money, and then, well, acquaintances through acquaintances reported actually somewhere ran away with the capital, like abroad even, leaving here business overgrown with debts and angry creditors of all stripes. "We'll look for him," Ekaterina sighed. "We'll try to get ours back." "Aye, there, the gold disappeared and my great-great-grandfather's watch." Marina felt like in a nightmare, and at the same time as awake. At last everything was clear. "I must apologize," she whispered. "Well, consider that apology accepted," said Catherine. "Anything in life happens. I think he made me such a monster that you as a good deed. You come on, drink tea and eat cake, and then I'll give you the phone numbers of his other victims. We'll decide together how to get the scoundrel and at least something back."